Welcome to Getting Domestic with Ding.
Sound test 1 2 3. Hello, this is Ding. We're back with another video. We're gonna make some bread today. So I've been baking this bread ever since, I don't know, like a year or two ago when my friend Annalie gave me a sourdough starter. And it's really simple. All it really involves is this like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 step process. And I think just, by the end of it, you'll be kind of confused, but that's sort of how bread making works, right? Okay, so a levain is this mixture that I'm making right here. I'm putting in some sourdough starter, just some old sourdough starter, into an equal weight part of flour and water. So like 100 grams of flour, 100 grams of water, and like a spoonful of starter. I'm just mixing it all up, and I'm gonna leave this on my counter for about 8 hours before I start making bread. You can leave it overnight, or the morning of. You can make bread that afternoon. And then you're gonna weigh out about 640 grams of water. I reserve a little bit of that water for dissolving my salt later, which I'll talk about. But then you're gonna pour in about 200 grams of that of the levain. And you could put in more, you could put in less, but for me, 200 grams is what works well. I add in 400 grams of white bread flour and 400 grams of whole wheat flour. I use King Arthur flour, and I think it really does make a big difference. So, me being Northern Chinese, I'm going to mix this with chopsticks and not really get my hands too involved at this moment. So I moved on to a dough scraper. I'm really just loosely bringing this together because I'm just going to leave this on the counter for about an hour, which is the auto lease, which is just some time for the flour to get hydrated and some time for the gluten to develop. The next thing I'm going to do is just add some salt. I use the ratio of every 400 grams of flour, I put 8 grams of salt. So here I have 800 grams of flour, I'm going to put 16 grams of salt. Do you remember that water? I'm just grinding down this salt, by the way. It's like super coarse. Do you remember that water I reserved earlier? I'm just going to pour that into my little suribachi thingy to just kind of dissolve the salt. Some people mix the salt straight onto it, and I think that's weird to me. So I like to dissolve the salt with a little bit of extra water. You just kind of work it in. You really have to kind of, at this point, you do have to go in with your hands. I hate this part because my eczema always gets crazy. But I'm doing a bit of a mild slap and fold. I feel like with bread that you're just letting develop for so long on the counter, you don't have to actually do this very much. And I think if you do it, you're sort of wasting your time. But I haven't really empirically tried this out, so who could never be sure? Anyway, you do that and you just let it sit on the counter for about 30 minutes, and for about 3 or 4 hours afterwards, you're just going to keep doing a stretch and fold. But during the first stretch and fold, that's when you can incorporate some seeds. So I love putting in some seeds into my bread here. Putting in some hemp seeds, some pumpkin seeds, some flax seeds, and some sesame seeds. I don't think I showed the flax seeds here. Sorry, guys. But you're just lifting it up from every side. In the beginning, you can be kind of rough with it, like I am being. But later, you'll see that I'm going to be a little more gentle. Another thing you'll notice is that, you can see this dough is getting a lot stretchier and less sticky. And that's just what happens when you kind of let the dough do its own thing. So you do this for about 6 or 7 more times. Every time you can start being a little bit more gentle. So you can see here I'm doing a gentle stretch and fold. I stretch it up, fold it back down about 5 times. In the beginning, I like to turn it. Towards the end, I don't really like to do that. So this is getting towards the end. This is my 7th stretch and fold. And I wet my hand so that it doesn't stick to the dough, and I'm just gently lifting it because you can also feel that the bubbles are starting to form, and you don't want to pop all those little bubbles. So be really gentle. This is your soft little baby. You don't want to crush its hopes and dreams. So yeah, one last little stretch and fold. Look how cute it is. Anyway, when you're almost ready, you're ready to pre-shape. So when you're ready to pre-shape, clear out your counter, do a very light dusting of flour and do one last stretch and fold. Some people don't like to do this. I like to do it because it gives the dough a little bit more body so that I don't have to be worried about how, loose and shaggy it could be at this point. So I do that, I turn it out onto the counter, and I'm gonna split it into two loaves because obviously that's a big round baby. You can use your dough scraper, I guess you could use a knife. I don't know. If you're baking sourdough bread, you should probably get a dough scraper. Once you have your two halves, you're going to pre-shape this. Pre-shaping is super important. This is when you just kind of like grab the ends, you're kind of stretching it all in, and then roll it up and kind of just grab the end of the dough and pull it towards you using the friction of the counter to kind of help you shape it into a tight little ball. And pre-shaping is really important because if you sort of don't really give the dough this like second to final stretch, it's not going to have that oven spring. It's not going to have that elasticity to be able to hold all the bubbles when the steam rises, and it's not going to give you those big juicy bubbles. So you really, really have to pre-shape. I can't say this enough, you guys. So anyway, after you're done pre-shaping, you're just gonna let it sit on the counter and let the dough relax for a little bit because you're gonna get it all really nice and tight again for the final shaping. So with the final shaping, I also like to kind of flour up my bannetons, my little flour molds. You could also use a bowl or a basket and just cover it in a cotton or a linen cloth, but you must always dust it with some flour. Here I'm using a mixture of rice and just all-purpose flour. The rice flour really helps the dough not to stick. So here I am, I put some flour on the top of the dough, and I am turning it over and bringing the edges of the dough back into the center, into the sticky middle, and doing that little technique again where I'm just kind of sliding it on the counter towards me to get that skin super tight. And then I do that to both loaves and just kind of like sit it in the little molds. And afterwards, you can either let it sit for 3 to 4 hours on the counter, or you can put it into a plastic bag and just leave it in the fridge overnight. And then when you're ready to bake, when you leave it in the fridge, you can leave it for like 8 to 12 hours. This is called retarding the dough. Well, it's French, I guess. I don't know. So again, either 3 to 4 hours on the counter or overnight in the fridge. And when you're ready to bake, you're going to preheat your Dutch oven, which is like a enamel or cast iron pot in the oven at 500 degrees for an hour. During that time, you can cut out a little parchment paper. I like to use a little parchment paper to transfer my dough onto into my Dutch oven so that there's some handles for me to grab it with. You can score your dough with a lamb or just a blade or a knife, but you really want to use something sharp because you want to get this job done quick. Okay, so this helps the dough open up in the oven when it touches that hot surface. So close the lid, put that piping hot Dutch oven into the oven and reduce the temperature to 460 or 450. I always forget to reduce the temperature and then the bottom of my bread burns. Oops. You bake that for about 20 minutes and then you can bake uncovered for 20 minutes to kind of brown the top. So you can see it's been covered during this time and it's pretty pale, but you can also see that there's been a dramatic oven spring. So I uncover it, put it back in the oven. 20 minutes later, you kind of check the color of the crust, and you can just kind of tell by your eyes whether or not that bread is done. If not, you can always take it out and just kind of knock it on the bottom, and if it sounds hollow, it's done. Okay? So here I am using some cooking implements to take out my bread, and I like to let it cool on the banneton. Just so that there's some airflow. I don't have an oven rack, guys, sorry. So once it's cooled down, then it's done. and it's so exciting, but you really have to actually wait for it to cool down, maybe like 2 or 3 hours before you can slice into it. Otherwise, the bread is sort of a gummy mess, and I kind of allude to that later in the video. But look how beautiful it is on the inside. Oh my god, I love the seeds. I think it could have gone a little bit longer on the counter because some of the bubbles are a little bit uneven. But really, honestly, I'm really happy with this bread. It tastes great, and it looks great, and it's sourdough, so I guess it's good for you. I don't know.
Who can never be sure?
Extraordinary.
But I do know that I really enjoy the taste of this bread.
Turn towards me. Slight tangy flavor. Warm and supple. The bread is still a little soft and gummy. It's because I cut into it too quickly. A bitch couldn't wait.
So you see, it's really actually just that simple. All it is just
Make the levain, measure out your ingredients,
Auto-lease, salt and knead, stretch and fold 6 to 8 times, pre-shape, final shape.
Bake, and you're done. What could be easier?
So what did we learn today? I think we learned that making sourdough is completely incompatible with modern life under late capitalism because of how much time it takes. But once we overthrow this oppressive system, everyone can make bread at home. So be sure to save my recipe for after the revolution. Okay, bye!